Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VEASAN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos, as always. But, Michael, I see that we're both wearing black as we're mourning the loss of the 2022 Dallas Cowboys.
When I was in the military academy at Valley Forge Military Academy, the home of J.D. Salinger, Norman Schwarzkopf, very proud that I went there and made it through. Had the worst brown shoes in the history of the Corps. Take great pride in that. I never shined them. But they used to play taps before we went to bed, and I almost feel like we should play taps for you and your Cowboys, so I wore black for you today. I feel so badly for you. You had such high hopes, and, you keep going down that Kellen Moore's a genius. God, he's so good. I don't know why he doesn't have a joystick on the sideline when he's calling plays. Like, he should have one of those things, and he should have that what's that thing that they put on for, that commercial where you cover your eyes?
The meta?
That's really what the outfit he should be in. I mean, that's the outfit he should be in. Look, it was a fitting ending to – here's the question I like to start this podcast off. Mm-hmm. With you, Mr. Cowboy, and Dave Ross and John Goulet and all these Cowboy fans.
Tough day for us, yes.
If Kyle Shanahan was calling plays for the Cowboys, what's the score of that game?
Cowboys by 10.
Thank you. Case rested.
Yeah, it's Cowboys by 10. And it's the unfortunate side.
Go ahead.
No, it's the unfortunate side of it. I thought early on when they had their guys and they were able to move the football pretty well, the touchdown drive I thought was a well-called drive. But then after that, then things kind of tapered off. And then, of course, the big happenstance there with Tony Pollard getting injured late in the second quarter, that was just a brutal injury for the Cowboys and what he means to that offense. And then right after that, then Dak Prescott throws the interception. And we're going to get to Dak because Dak was bad. Like make no bones about it. I like Dak Prescott. I don't think he's a great quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback, but he was bad in the biggest game of the season yesterday, and it's just an all-around just systemic collapse, I thought, in the second half from the Cowboys' offensive side of the football. But it was Moore was right there at the top of it as well with what he was doing with the play calling and how they managed that game. And McCarthy deserves a little bit of the blame too for how they managed that game. But it was not a good situation. As I felt, Michael, that this was a game that Dallas could have won, not easily won, but it was a winnable game and they let it slip.
I recommended Dallas had taken the points during the day, and obviously I lost it. But I think the handicap was right. I think the Pollard injury was devastating. But once the Pollard injury happened, I think we saw that, Moore with no experience, right, doesn't understand how to adapt and adjust when you lose your best player. It's not an easy task, right? It's not something that you just do. But, he's looking at that play sheet and, instead of looking at that play sheet, the play sheet just has plays on it. And that's the way he calls the game, plays, a sequence of plays, instead of strategizing how to win the game. And he had a formula. He saw Washington do some things even though they lost. Mm-hmm. He saw the Raiders do a lot of things even though they lost. He saw Seattle do a lot of things and they lost. But he couldn't do any of the above. One of the things you want to do is run at the bubble, create a bubble. None of these things he did. And so to me, he's strictly a play caller, and they're in love with him, and he gets interviewed for head coaching jobs, and he's got a lot of talent on that team, and Dak takes a lot of responsibility, and he's deserving so. He's throwing the ball to an area they're playing zone, and he doesn't anticipate the guy being there. The cover 3 pass, what's his face? Olsen kept saying, why are they playing off? And they play off because they're playing cover 3. The guy's got the deep third. That's why they're playing off. And so, and when he didn't recognize that the guy was undercutting it and not taking the deep throw, he throws an interception. That's on him. And I think a lot of this, to me, what I see as the Cowboys is, I don't know why Mike McCarthy's holding a play sheet. He called plays in Green Bay, and he lets this guy call the game. And he calls the game. He doesn't strategize to win the game.
It was really just the turnover at the end of the first half when Dallas had a chance to win the middle eight, which we talk about all the time here on the podcast, winning that middle eight, end of the first half, beginning of the second half, because the Cowboys were going to get the ball to start the third quarter. And Dak throws that interception to Fred Warner that you're talking about. that to me was inexcusable because I thought that just based on the situation, San Francisco had 2 timeouts left. There was a little over a minute left to go. If you're Dallas, you're in 2nd and short after the Pollard injury. Why not run the football to keep that clock moving? And I know that you weren't really confident in Brett Maher and what he was doing, so nothing was a gimme in terms of a field goal yesterday. That's for damn sure. But just run the ball and make San Francisco use one of those timeouts, or at least make sure they don't get the football at the end of the half. I thought that execution towards the end of that first half was really, really poor, and that's what started this kind of snowball into the second half.
Right, and so he tries to throw a control pass, right? So Pollard gets hurt on the 1st and 10 play, right? Yep. And so they have to use their second timeout at that point. So now you got 1:24 to go. I'm with you. It's 2nd and 2. Let's see what happens. I think too often is teams are scared to let the clock work for them. Now, what Baltimore did against Cincinnati wasn't letting the clock work for you. That was stupidity.
Yeah.
But by running it, you allow the clock to work for you. So, even if you have to kick the field goal, the clock's going to wind itself down. And look, you can't throw an interception there. You just can't. Mm-hmm. And at 2nd and 2, I think again, it comes down to calling the right play at the right time. And the more I watch the Cowboys, I just never trust that offensive staff to do it. The defense, to me, played their balls off. I mean, by the fourth quarter, they were tired, they were worn out. I mean, the longest run of the game for the Kyle Shanahan's offense was the 13-yarder at the end of the game by Mitchell. I mean, they played their balls off, and it took a miracle. It took the Kittle catch, it took the pass interference. I mean, it took a lot, and they just don't ever play complementary football. They never do, and I just think, to me, if I don't understand why people think McCarthy's job's in jeopardy, because McCarthy's, to me, I see more as the weakness of their team.
I think that's definitely fair from an offensive standpoint. Jerry Jones was asked about that after the game, about Mike McCarthy's job, because there's the whole rumors of Sean Payton and is McCarthy coaching for his job after back-to-back 12-win seasons, win the playoff game last week, and they're still asking you if you're going to get fired. But here's what Jerry had to say when he spoke with the reporters when they asked him about Mike McCarthy's security and future with the Dallas Cowboys.
No, not at all. And their decision for our kicker was exonerated with his field goal in my mind, and I'm proud for him. But this is very sickening to not win tonight.
Yeah, he said the job is future is not in any uncertainty, and it's sickening, which I think is a great word to use.
It is sickening. I mean, he's got a really good team. I mean, look, I said it all along. I mean, obviously the 49ers covered, and those who picked them, congratulations. That's a good pick. But I felt like the Cowboys matched up to them, and I thought the Cowboys could. When I used to play Stratomatic baseball when I was a kid with Michael Cimino and Danny Reynolds, we would sit in my mother's kitchen, and we would play from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We would just play Stratomatic baseball, and we had these cards, and and sometimes I would be the Braves and Cimino would be the Phillies or the White Sox. We'd pick our favorite teams, and sometimes we would draft. And nothing infuriated me more than when I was on a losing streak and Cimino would say to me, or he'd say at the Reynolds, "Let me manage your team and watch me win with your team." and I'm 12 years old. I'm 13 years old. That line has stayed with me forever. Like, what would happen if Kyle called plays with that Dallas scheme? What would happen if Kyle or if Josh McDaniels called plays with Dallas? Like, there's a strategy involved. And we as much talent as you can collect, at some point there's got to be someone with experience on the sideline to say, okay, we've lost Pollard. All right, this game changes dramatically now because he is our offense. Forget about all this bullshit about Zeke. I mean, Zeke was once a thoroughbred. He's now a Clydesdale. I mean, he's got that brace. He can't run outside. So when you lose Pollard, there's no outside run game. You can't get the edge.
Yep.
But, of course, naturally, my man's trying to run the edge with Zeke. Like you can't get the edge. Like, why should we even try it? So we got to do something different. And there's no strategy. And so every time I watch these games, I'm thinking to myself, that Cimino line, let me manage your team. Like, what would happen? And I think for as talented as Dallas is, for them to not keep advancing is really a kind of a knock on them. They're the ones who saddled McCarthy with him. I mean, McCarthy can't call plays. McCarthy still has his play sheet from Green Bay, the way he had it set up in Green Bay. Meanwhile, the guy with the joystick on the sideline, he's got his own play sheet. But on that play sheet he has is never, how do I call plays to win this game? How do I set up the game to win the game? And then when someone gets hurt, you got to go on the sideline and figure out, like, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's what I have to do to win this game.
Now, I thought in the fourth quarter they tried to kind of adjust with maybe using some of those CeeDee Lamb quick passes to the out, almost as like a engineered run game because they couldn't get to the outside. So I thought they did some stuff to get CeeDee Lamb the football, which that was always my knock, and that was a knock on the Cowboys after last year's wild card loss to the 49ers, that Lamb had like one catch in the game. Pollard, I think, had 6 touches or whatever. So they weren't getting their best players the football in that game. I thought they did a better job of getting Lamb the ball. But I think we got to have the Dak conversation as well, because Dak was just flat out bad. And afterwards, he said all the right things, and he said, hey, the interceptions are unacceptable, 100% on me. And like, yeah, okay, it's nice that you said all the right things, but 23 of 37, 206, 2 picks, only 1 TD pass, and you're going up against a great defense, so it's not some cream puff defense that you're going to see. But still, you needed much better from a guy that has the contract that Dak Prescott has. Like, do you think Dak Prescott is playing well enough for this team to ultimately win these types of games going forward?
I think Dak is a perfect example, and the Giants should look at this. Dak is a perfect example of a good player that when you give him so much of your cap, it hurts you in other areas. Like, yeah, you can win with Dak, but you got to manage Dak, and you got to have some good players around Dak. If Dak doesn't have Pollard, look what happened, right? To me, that game was very clear. Pollard's their offense. Pollard has to get franchised. You know, Zeke's not going to be on the team next year. If he is, he's going to have to take a huge pay cut. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the key. And Dak is taking all the money because the position and because of the star and because of the allure. But when you get the ball with 3:04 to go in the game and it's 1st and 10, you know, you put Joey Burrow in that spot, 1st and 10 at the Dallas 18, and you get him going, he's going to complete some passes. He's going to find ways to make some plays. You know, you're not going that's the worst time to have a 3 and out. You need your best calls at that point. You need your best calls at that point. When he punted at 4th and 10, I said to Millie, they're not getting the ball back. They're not going to get the ball back because Kyle has enough stuff on his sheet that can control it. And then the ridiculous going to put the punt team out there and then punt it, and they have 2:05 to go in the half, and that they give them the chance to throw it. And once that clock ticked below 2:07, the 49ers could throw it. You know, and Kittle got 16 yards. Hell, if he got 9 yards, the game's going to end there. Mm-hmm. You know, so like to me, the strategy, the linking things together. We wrote about this for the Daily Coach today, about alignment, about how the F-105 was invented because it flew fast, you know, it had great range, and it could carry heavy bombs. But the 3 things never worked together. Like, that's exactly the description of the Dallas Cowboys. They never worked their team together. They did when they had Cooper Rush, but they never do that with Dak.
Do you think it's just that obviously they think highly of Dak Prescott and believe that he can be of the blue chip caliber guys, otherwise they wouldn't have given him that money? But it almost feels like they're like, okay, well, we have Dak back now. Let's like spread open the offense and just do all these things. But yeah, that stuff looks nice on paper with your statistics. But like you said, it doesn't help you win games, especially against these good opponents, which is what's required in the playoffs. Like, you're not going to get the layup of seeing an 8-9 team every single week in the playoffs. Like, that's not going to be the case. You're going to have to beat someone of quality, and the 49ers are of quality. And just to have that performance, I think if Dak just plays okay, the Cowboys win that game. But he was just bad.
Yeah, I mean, he makes mistakes. You can't. The game. There's no margin for error in these games. Great players play great at the greatest time. I mean, that's the fact. You got to play great. And San Francisco's unique because they don't ask Purdy to play great. They just ask Purdy to make really easy throws. I mean, and I said this, I wrote this for VSiN, like, once he took over, you know, again, you can continue reading Playboy with Lance, and once he took over, he fit exactly how he was going to do it, you know? You can continue reading that book, but, like, now going to the conference championship game, what are you going to do with Lance? You can't bring him back. I mean, you can bring him back, but he's going to be on the bench.
I mean, you got to trade him at this point. I mean, you got to see what you can
Are
get.
you done that book? Are you still reading it or what? I mean, reading all the. I mean, we got to go through. We should get all the playmates of the '70s, the playmates of the year of the '70s, and put them on a list, and then let you grade them like you grade Trey Lance. Well, I need more time with her. I need a little bit more time with that one. Seriously.
we got to get a sample size. We got to see what's going on.
I mean, look, I think to me, there's design problems and there's production problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you spend time sitting back in the offseason, you've got to understand your design and the production. For example, the Giants, they don't have a design problem. They have a production problem. They're not good enough. Their talent isn't good enough, right? Including Daniel Jones. But they don't have a design. They did everything in their design. So to me, I think Dallas has a design issue. I think Dan Quinn did a remarkable. I thought Kyle Shanahan's line that he said, look, I don't have an advantage here because Quinn's running something that he didn't run in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know what he's doing. That says a lot about Dan Quinn right there.
Yeah, he took the year off that he had after he got fired by the Falcons, and he adjusted. He reinvented himself, and that's why, that the defense from Dallas, and that's why I'm so frustrated. It's like they wasted such an amazing performance by that defense. How often did you hear Deebo Samuel's name being called? Or Christian McCaffrey's name being called? You didn't hear those. McCaffrey scored the touchdown, but they bottled him up for much of that game. These are guys that you worry about going in. Now, Kittle and Ayuk made big plays. You're not going to be able to stop everybody because they have too many good players. But Deebo and McCaffrey, those guys were pretty much bottled up. That defense was flying around. Parsons is unbelievable as a player, and for the Cowboys to waste that performance. But the defense did make one mistake, though, I thought, in that game there, and it ended up proving to be a pretty crucial one. It was late in the third quarter when Purdy has the pass. He throws it. It goes through Barr's hands, and then Trayvon Diggs right there, if he just catches that ball, it was tied 9-9. That takes the touchdown off the board if he can get that interception. And I think of all the corners in the NFL, Diggs is the last guy I would expect to drop that football because that's the one thing that he does. He has excellent ball skills being a former wide receiver. And, we saw him last year have 11 interceptions. The one thing he does is he always takes advantage of those opportunities, but he let one slip through his fingers, and the Niners end up scoring the touchdown. They don't look back.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, that ball got tipped, and it just went right through his hands. It just went right through his hands, unfortunately. The other big play was the Kittle defensive holding call. Mm-hmm. That was killer too because it's 3rd and 8 there. They're going to stop him. They stop him. They sack him for 6-yard loss.
Yep.
And they're going to kick that field goal there, right? And so then it's going to be 12-9. And so now you got a better chance to get in it. I know it was, but the problem I had with that call was that Purdy was under pressure immediately. Like Purdy was getting sacked while that was happening. I thought that was kind of like, it was the right call.
Mm-hmm.
He clearly did, but it was down the field, and by the time he got down the field, I thought Purdy was getting sacked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it felt like it had no bearing on the play. Kittle could have been running wide open. Purdy wouldn't have found him because he was under pressure immediately on that one.
Yeah, because Purdy never even looked. There was no way that was going to get, to me, that call there was the turning the two things that happened, the dropped interception and then that call. 3rd and 8, you get that penalty, and now they got a 1st and 10, and then you get the penalty on Hankins on defensive holding. Seriously, I never even saw that. There was a couple calls during that drive there that you just like, well, wait a minute, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it was too bad. But I don't even want to blame the refs because I think the Cowboys, they had plenty of opportunities to win that game, and you want the best players to play.
I think you just blame the guy in the basement. That's all. He's sitting in the basement.
playing those video
here's
games.
The thing people don't understand, and I don't dislike Kellen Moore as a human being. I just think, to me, experience matters. I think in these situations, you need experience. You need to have experience. You need to experience moments to gain experience for the moment. And so you need this. And so when you don't have that, and you hire somebody who's very young, who doesn't have a lot of experience, then when you get in this situation and you lose your best player, how do you react? How do you react? That some of these guys who have coached a long time, well, I remember in this game we lost this. Here's what we did. Mm-hmm. I lost this guy. Here's what we did. Like that element is missing, the strategic adjustment element in game based on personnel. I mean, you're always going to lose players. Like that call sheet he's got in front of him is a Pollard call sheet. Everything on that call sheet is to enhance Pollard. Now you lose Pollard. Where are we going?
Well, I think you're going easy on Kellen Moore there about the experience because this is his 4th year as the play caller. I mean, this might just be who he is.
No, I know that's who he is, but I'm just telling you that the fact that if you're going to hire him as a head coach, it's like McDaniel going up to Buffalo, and then Cincinnati comes in, don't even want to run the ball, and they run for 170. You go up there, you're supposed to be a run game guru, and you put the ball in Kyler Thompson's hands 45 times, and people actually think you're doing a good job. Like, there's a strategy involved on how to win the game. Mm-hmm. How are we going to play today to win today? And that could be completely different than what we have to do tomorrow. Like San Francisco's strategy to beat Philly is going to be different than their strategy to beat Dallas.
Final point on the Cowboys, because I do want to get to the Niners, the winning team in this game as they advance to the NFC Championship game for the 2nd straight year. What'd you make of the last play of the game there from Dallas?
I have no idea what the fuck they were doing. I have no idea. I've never seen it before. Like, I mean, and everybody's going to focus on that stupid play, but that play is just, to me, obviously
you're trying to come up with something.
Practice.
Yeah.
They practiced it. But, look, to me, I think the biggest mistake, and I tweeted this out, when it was 3:04 to go and you got the ball at your own 18, and if I'm Mike McCarthy, like, I know we can't punt. You know why I know we can't punt? Because Wisniewski is the best inside 20 punter in the league. He's a weapon. He's a weapon. If I punt it, if I don't get a first down and I punt from my 18 and they get the ball back, I'm going to start the drive with no timeouts from my own 8, from my inside my 10 or 5.
Yeah.
I can't do that. Like, again, that's second order thinking. You got to think ahead. So even though I get killed for hating going for it on 4th down, which I don't, I think at 3rd and 10 at that point, you got to go for it because at that point in the game, or 2nd and 10's got to be a better call, or 3rd, because we can't punt it back, because even if we get it back, we're going to have the ball inside our own 10 with no timeouts left. We're going to have to go 90 yards against this pass rush. I would rather take my chances. To me, instead of focusing on the last play, I think if I'm Mike McCarthy, I'd go back to 3:04 to go in the game and look at that strategy, look at what we called, what were we thinking, what were we prepared for, why didn't we execute here?
Yeah, that second to last drive was horrendous there. And
that's the game. Everybody in the media is going to focus on that stupid play at the end of the game, which was meaningless. Like, that's ridiculous. To me, the strategy of the moment was 3:04 to go in the game. We can't punt it back because he's the greatest inside 20. It's like when the Patriots lost to the Giants in Indianapolis. That punter should have been the MVP of the game. The Patriots' starting point was the best they ever had was their own 24. They played on the long field the whole day. So when you got the ball at 3:04, and I said this out loud, we can't punt it back because we'll get the ball back with no, like, you got to think ahead. So what? You have 3 timeouts. Who gives a fuck? I can't go 90 yards with no timeouts against this fucking rush.
Yeah. Too often it's reactionary and it's not proactive from the Dallas Cowboys coaching staff, or at least on the offensive side of the ball. I thought Quinn, once again, was outstanding. But on the Niners side, I mean, their defense was also phenomenal. I mean, they've been phenomenal for much of this season here. Fred Warner, I thought, was the best player on the field for both teams. I mean, what he did in the middle of that defense was unbelievable, whether it was in the run game or was in coverage. I mean, the guy he made life difficult for Dak Prescott on that offense. But the Niners hold this Cowboys team to 12 points as a game where their offense didn't really have their best stuff, but the defense was why the Niners got to this point, and they showed why in the biggest game of the year.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're so fast, they're so athletic, they run to it, they cover, they play zone, and they're able to force you to hold the ball, and then they're going to get pressure on you. I mean, it's all their front, right? And their offensive line wasn't playing well with the movement, handling the movement. And once they kind of got a handle on what runs they needed to do as they adjusted the game out, they found a way. And look, he got the ball to guys that can make yards after the catch. I mean, the Kittle play, what was amazing on the Kittle play? I think it was Gallimore. They never mentioned it on television, but it was Gallimore chasing Kittle down the field. Did you remember that play?
Yeah, it was a defensive
that's
lineman.
how do you not circle that and say, whoa? I mean, you could see John Madden. Look at this big fella. Like, he's running with Kittle down the field. It was remarkable.
It's crazy. I mean, the amount of athletes for both defenses, it was just like some people were complaining about, oh, this isn't that good of a game because it wasn't high scoring. I enjoyed the game, and I didn't enjoy the losing part of the game, but I enjoyed just from a football fan, taking my Cowboys fandom out of it as a football fan. The amount of team speed and physicality on both defenses was unbelievable. Like, that's what playoff football is supposed to look like.
It is, and look, there was a point in the game where, if you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan, you were rooting for Dallas to win because without Pollard, they weren't coming back to Philly and they were going to have a hard time playing the next week. Because every team that's played San Francisco the next week has lost. They've gotten beaten up.
Yep.
And so, as Eagle fans, you're rooting for that. But with the Niners coming back and their ability to, look, it'll be a fun game because both both teams are built this pretty much the same way. Both teams want to win with their defensive front. Both teams secondary, you can throw the ball on. Both teams have, San Francisco has great speed at linebacker. Philadelphia's improved their speed at linebacker. Both teams can run the football with their different styles. It's a contrast in styles. And it's going to come down to what skill players play at the highest level. Is it going to be Kittle, Samuel, Ayuk, or is it going to be A.J. Brown? Is it going to be Smith? Miles Sanders. It's going to come down to that.
The Niners have now won 12 straight games, including the playoffs, their longest win streak since 1984, as they go back to the NFC Championship game.
I was there for that. That. We lost. We only lost one game that year. We lost to the Steelers at home, 17-14. We tied the game up. Ray Wersching made a field goal. We tied the game up. Alan Kennedy from Washington State, our backup swing tackle, lined up illegally off the ball. They called the penalty. We went to kick it again, and we missed, and that's how we lost. That was our only loss of the year.
Wow. Obviously those teams back then were juggernauts. This 49ers team, I don't know if they're a juggernaut, but they're a damn good outfit as they deserve to go to the NFC title game. And we'll get to the other games here coming up shortly, but I think we have the four best teams from this league, which is the cool part about it. So we have the four best. Yeah. Nobody kind of fluked their way into the conference championship round there. Niners, Eagles.
There's no frauds. There's no frauds left. Yeah. There's no frauds left.
Yeah, no frauds. Well, we'll get to the David Ogilvy coming up later in the last segment here to find out who the fraud was this week. But, Michael, let's take our first break on the other side. We got to talk about Burrow and the Bengals beating the Bills. All right, we also saw in the earlier game on Sunday, the Cincinnati Bengals, the big dogs of the AFC, if you ask them, they go into Western New York and beat the Buffalo Bills 27-10 to advance to the AFC Championship game for the second consecutive season. This was a game that a lot of people kind of liked Buffalo in this spot, 6-point favorites. The betting market definitely favored them, but right from the get-go, you could see that the Bengals had different intentions here on this game. They went ahead and took it right to the Bills and never let up.
I thought they played really shitty against Miami, and I thought they would have an answer. And I took the Miami game as a launching point for them to improve, and I was the idiot for recommending Buffalo because this game was over from the first play of the game. Buffalo was never in this game. And credit the Bengals. They came out with full intentions. The field made it slippery, but the field works for both teams, right? Buffalo's offensive line couldn't block Cincinnati. Allen was under pressure, yet Burrow wasn't under any pressure. So, to me, this is a kind of a game that if you're Brendan Beane and you're Sean McDermott, this is a come-to-Jesus moment for your team. Like, you got to sit down and say, okay, we lost this game. We had a really good season, but here's why we'll never get to where we want to go if we don't fix this, this, and this. I have some ideas on what to fix, but to me, I think for Buffalo Bills, this was the best thing that could have happened to you because you just basically got told that Joey Burrow is better than your quarterback, Patrick Mahomes is better than your quarterback, and until we adjust this, we ain't getting to the conference championship game.
You said you have some ideas on what they should fix. Is it in the trenches, or where else are you looking here?
Oh, I think there's no doubt. They're far lacking in the defense. They can't get pressure.
Yeah.
They can't dominate the game. They're too small defensively. They want to be a nickel team, but they're too small. And even though Zach Taylor doesn't want to run the ball, they kick their ass up front. They kick their ass up front. And they had 34 rushing attempts for 172 yards.
Whew.
they just kicked their ass up front. They did anything they wanted to do. I mean, they couldn't tackle them. I mean, every time they ran the ball, whether it was Perrine, Mixon, I mean, they were carrying them for yards. And this is a Cincinnati team that typically hadn't run the ball very well. And this is with a bunch of backup offensive linemen. To me, they're too small on defense. The nickel scheme, they get torn apart. They need to fix. They need to look at San Francisco, Philly, and these teams that did Dallas that can dominate the defensive front. They can't. And then their offensive line. Mm-hmm. For all the glory and the Pro Football Focus grades and all this, their offensive line isn't very good. I mean, Scaffold's not very good. Deion Dawkins, to me, is an overrated left tackle. He gets called for holding at least once a game. Right? The right side of their line's not very good. Allen's escapability comes to life. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the two areas from a personnel standpoint. From a scheme standpoint, like I know Ken Dorsey's going for interviews for head coaching job. Why, I don't know. Unless he's bringing Josh Allen with him, I have no idea why he would go for an interview. Like I've seen nothing out of Buffalo's offense that was creative or told me they ever were in control of the game. I see them make big plays, but I never see them find ways to get Diggs the ball. If Jefferson can get the ball as many times as he can and people are taking him out of the game, why can't they get Diggs the ball? Right? And their offensive line prop. So to me, when I watch them, I see a bunch of plays. I don't see a scheme. When I watch Cincinnati, I see a scheme. When I watch San Francisco, I see a scheme. When I watch Dallas, I see plays. When I watch, Philadelphia, I see a scheme. When I watch Buffalo, I see Josh Allen. You win the game for us. Go ahead. Just do whatever you got to do.
And I think that's why we saw the influx of turnovers from Josh Allen this year, because there was nothing that, hey, Josh, here's a layup for you to go and hit to this guy, or here's this. It's Josh Allen extending the play, avoiding a rusher, stiff-arming some defensive tackle, then throwing some ball 45 yards across the field for a first down. Like that was always the explosive play for Buffalo. It was asking him to put on that Superman cape, and you can't do that against the best teams in the league. And I thought it was interesting, and I want to get your take on this, because Tony Romo on the broadcast, which, I mean, he's something else at these days. But I actually thought he brought up a decent point, though, about this Buffalo Bills team. And he brought up the point about how they're built to be an indoor team, but they play in Western New York. And so in Western New York in January, in the most important games, the weather is going to be crappy. It's going to be snowy. It's going to be windy. It's not going to be ideal conditions for a team that's built like the way that Buffalo was built. And they got to acknowledge that and get stronger and get more physical in the trenches. Otherwise, I feel like they're going to continue to be this 7-on-7 team that gets beat when a bully comes into their building.
Well, I mean, look, he calls it indoor. They're a nickel team. They want to be able to, under the pretense of, we're going to get the lead in the first half and we're going to rush the passer in the second half. They're not a man-to-man team. They're a cover 7 team. They're a quarters cover team. Mm-hmm. They can't play man-to-man. If they do, they're going to get toasted, right? And so they rely on their safeties, who they didn't have. They rely on their intelligence, but they're small. And so the analogy is the correct one. I mean, I wish Tony's got so much information that I wish he would stop trying to be friends with everybody and say what he thinks. Because everybody's nice great. Like, he's really too nice. Like, ever since he got this contract, he's like, he doesn't want to make anybody mad at him. I mean, when he said Leslie Frazier should be a head coach again, he didn't watch. I mean, like, Leslie Frazier's a wonderful guy, but I'm not sure he should be a head coach again. I think he's probably in the right role. Like, he's a defensive coach, and his stint in Minnesota was not very good. But my point here is I think that he's right. Like, you got to build. And I think this cost Peyton Manning more than one Super Bowl. The Colts built a team that was built for indoors. Yep. Freeney, Mathis. So when they went to New England on a shitty field, they couldn't rush. Okay, so I've often said this. The greatest job I would have wanted in my life was to be a GM of a dome team and build it like an outdoor team. Mm-hmm. I wanted to be a size speed team in a dome. Because if you're a size speed team in a dome, with that crowd noise, you're just going to kick everybody's ass. Yep. It's when the Vikings were really good when they had Dolman, Millard, Noga. Oh, my God. You couldn't. And in that dome, they were big. They were physical. You couldn't handle them. So I see that as the same problem. And this philosophy that they have defensively is married to their offensive philosophy. But I don't even know what – if I asked you, describe their offensive philosophy to me in 5 words, can you do it?
I'll describe it in 3 words. Josh, save us.
That's it. Exactly right. You got it. That's it. Josh, go make a play.
Yeah.
And that's why Diggs is so pissed off. Because at the end of the day, for as much as Josh has improved his accuracy, and he has, and he's proven a lot of us wrong about that, there are times when his accuracy loses the strike zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no consistency. And so they can't run the ball unless he's the runner. Unless they run six-back, they can't run it. It's really challenging.
We talked about it on Thursday's podcast when we were previewing this game, and we said that, all right, Cincinnati, they're dealing with that offensive line that's banged up. However, once Von Miller got hurt on Thanksgiving, Buffalo's pass rush has really dropped off the face of the earth. And the ESPN stat, and for whatever it's worth, they put this out there. They said Cincinnati had a pass block win rate of 56.5%, their fourth best rate of any game this season. And that's with 3 backups across their offensive line. That stat tells you right there that they couldn't take advantage of the Dolphins' own line. They couldn't take advantage of this Bengals' own line. And that's why they're going home.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you just look at it from when they beat Miami, they gave up. When they beat Miami back in Week 15, they gave up. Well, let's go back to the Jet game. The Jet game, the Jets moved the ball on them. The Jets had every chance in that game. They beat the shit out of the Jets. That they got pressure on that game, right? Miami has a chance to beat them. They gave 405 yards. Forget Chicago, your boy, the running back, Fields. They couldn't do anything in the passing game. Then New England puts 341 on them. I mean, New England moves the ball. They just turned it over. And then Miami could have moved the ball on them. And then yesterday they give up. So they're right. Anytime they played against somebody, they've won with their offense. They haven't really won with their defense, and they don't have any physicality up front to get. The Bengals were in complete control of that game every single time. There was never a moment, even when the middle 8 happened and you thought Buffalo was going to go down and score. I never think Buffalo, I think Buffalo just makes a play.
Yeah.
Somehow they make a play. Think about it. They beat New England to get in 35-23, but New England gives up 2 returns for touchdowns in that game. They scored 21 points with their offense in that game.
It really was bad from Buffalo's offense. And when the weather gets colder, this is what kind of happens to these teams that are built to be indoor kind of teams that have to play outside. On the Cincinnati side of things, though, these guys they came in and they were motivated. I know a lot of the talk this week was about the potential neutral site game in Atlanta if it was going to be Bills Chiefs in the AFC title game. Everybody was talking about how, hey, it's already sold out and all the ticket allotment for Chiefs fans and for Bills fans, they've sorted all that stuff out. Let's just go play the games this weekend and then we'll go to Atlanta next Sunday to decide who wins the AFC. But the Bengals, they're like, hey, guys, we're the defending AFC champions. Have you guys forgotten about us? Here's what Zach Taylor had to say after the game about this whole neutral site thing that was brewing this past week.
For the neutral site, we had our mindset to go play in Kansas City, and it is tough because they have to formulate the plans for coin tosses, and they got to formulate the plans for neutral site games, and we just keep screwing it up for everybody, and I hate that for people that have to endure all those logistical issues, and then we just keep screwing it up. So I'm sorry.
The wry smile at the end there. I'm sorry, but these guys were mad.
Yeah, I think give them credit, too, because I thought they did a really good job of game plan. Like I said this all week on the show, that when you lose your lineman in game, you got to adjust it, and you got to make it work. When you lose your lineman and you're not going to have them for the week, you got a chance to really kind of coach it and prepare it. So give them credit for that. And give Taylor credit. Look, Burrow is unbelievable. He can escape. He moves, and he makes plays, and Amaromo's defense is really good. They were more physical. They got pressure on Allen. We talk about the field really helped Cincinnati. It did, but it did, it helped. It didn't help Buffalo in their line. They were getting pressure the whole time. So I give Taylor credit. I was impressed that he actually ran the football in the game. I thought he was going to go into one of those 50-pass games and not throw, but he did. And look, they had everything they needed. They controlled the ball. They controlled the pace. They come out of the game, they go 6 plays touchdown, 10 plays touchdown. They had 5 possessions in the first half, and they almost scored on the last one with 40 seconds. Think about it.
Yeah.
They just dominated the game, and give them credit. Now, going to Kansas City this week will be a challenge because Chris Jones and, that's a better front to block with Frank Clark and all those guys. That's a harder front to block than Buffalo, I can tell you that. So you just can't automatically say, since these lines better, that Buffalo, it just proves how bad Buffalo's defensive front is.
I think it's a really important note to keep in mind this week at the lead up, because I think everyone's going to forget that offensive line is banged up because we saw them play well against Buffalo. So people are going to kind of just cast it off to the side like, oh yeah, their line's banged up, but they can survive it. It's a different animal with Chris Jones on that front.
And Karras hurt his knee in the game too.
Yeah.
I mean, they said Karras hurt his knee. I mean, I don't understand why we have sideline reporters at these games. We learn nothing. Twitter gives you more information on what's going on, who's out of the game. If you just follow that one app, they'll tell you who's in the game, who's not. I mean, I don't understand it. We'll get to that in another block. The whole Mahomes thing.
We'll definitely get to that when we talk Mahomes. After the game, Joe Burrow said that they, quote, better send those refunds about the tickets to the neutral site game. Burrow, though, in his whole aura and demeanor, he's given this franchise so much damn confidence. And you can see, they go into every game thinking that we don't give a damn if it's at Arrowhead, if it's at Buffalo, in the playoffs, we're going to go in there and win the game. And this is what he's done dating back to college at LSU with that team when he had Jefferson and Chase and those guys and they won the national title. It's not quite Brady-esque because, Brady's won 7 Super Bowls and that's a whole
it's Brady-esque.
But
from a competitive standpoint,
it kind of feels like it. I didn't want to compare him because, Brady is the GOAT, but it's kind of up there in terms of that sort of aura and confidence what he's given to a franchise who over the last 20-plus years had been the laughingstock.
Yeah, look. He's remarkable. He's got a level of competitiveness that far exceeds most people. So that translates into his preparation. It translates into the way his teammates kind of feed off of him, and the personality that he brings to the team, holding players accountable and falling in line, knowing that he's raising his level. When your best player is your best worker, you got a lot going for you here. So. Yeah, look, it just goes back. If you want to just add more fuel to the Urban Meyer mythology, remember, Urban Meyer, only took Joe Burrow because he was Mr. Ohio.
Yeah.
Then never gave him a chance to compete. Didn't even get him in a red jersey. He got the shit kicked out of him in a scrimmage, and he transfers to LSU because he was 3-star and everybody else was 5-star. Nobody will admit that, but I know that story for a fact. I know that story. I know that story from somebody who witnessed that story. He got the shit kicked out of him in a game that in a scrimmage that his mother actually went and said, why is this happening to my son? And he transferred. But he wasn't good enough to play for Urban at Ohio State. But Urban should get it. This is the mythology that goes on. These guys, a great coach. Okay. You had Joe Burrow and you ran him off, basically.
It's
because he was 3-star.
He was a 3-star.
He wasn't 5. Think about that. God rest his soul, but Joe Burrow couldn't beat out Dwayne Haskins because Dwayne Haskins was 5-star from Ohio. He was a. Think about that, fam.
They could have had Burrow. They had Burrow, and they let him go to LSU, and we saw how that story ended in college. Last point on Burrow here before we take another break. He now joins Russell Wilson and Ben Roethlisberger as the only starting quarterbacks to win 5 playoff games within their first 3 seasons. That's just truly just awesome stuff there from Burrow. Also the 5th QB in the Super Bowl era to win each of his first 3 playoff road starts. And now he's going to go back to the scene of the crime next Sunday as they take on the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead, as I'm sure the Chiefs are looking for revenge after what happened in last year's AFC title game. We'll get that rematch between the 2 best teams in the AFC. But, Michael, let's take another break, and we'll get to Saturday's games on the other side. All right, let's get to Saturday's divisional games, and we'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Jacksonville Jaguars 27-20 at Arrowhead Stadium. Coming off of the bye, the Chiefs were rolling early, but of course the big story with this game, late in the first quarter, Patrick Mahomes suffering what they're calling a high ankle sprain, left the game for the entire second quarter, came back, played well in the second half, but clearly compromised. But Michael, what did you make of what we saw Saturday afternoon, and kind of how do we spin this forward here for the Chiefs with Mahomes dealing with a high ankle sprain?
Well, I thought to start the game off, I thought he was sensational. He was making throws and, doing everything that Patrick Mahomes typically does. And then once again, he gets hurt, and you knew it was a high ankle sprain instantly. You could just tell from the injury. And I think the conversation on the sideline that you saw between Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Rick Burkhalter, the trainer, was, if we inject this you can probably continue to play, not at your normal level, but it could affect you next week. See, what happens on high ankle sprains is they're hard. They're really hard to inject because it really affects your lateral movement. You can go straight ahead. We played the Chiefs one year at New England with Jeremy Maclin. He was their leading receiver. He had a high ankle sprain in the game against Houston, the wild card round the week before, and he tried to play the next week. Well, you inject it, and then he tries to keep playing, and it becomes a problem. And I think that was the conversation. Look, we need to keep you healthy for the next week. We need to keep you going. And, I don't know how he's going to do it next week. I mean, I'm sure he's a tough guy. I'm sure he's going to do everything he can. But as Romo said yesterday, he's had them. I've seen players with them. Like, this can't be taken lightly. Like, I actually thought Tony Pollard's injury was less than what I saw Mahomes get, although Pollard ends up breaking his fibula.
Yeah.
And Mahomes did. Now, they say when the X-rays come back negative. Of course they come back negative because X-rays can only see broken bones, right? So you got to be able to see the ligaments and all that. And I just think it's going to be hard for him to plant and drive the ball. And his movement, as we saw in this game, his movement is what makes him so great.
And they had the MRI Sunday morning, and they said that the MRI confirmed that it's a high ankle sprain. It looked like it's a little bit more than that. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not even going to try to play one, but it looked like it was a pretty bad injury from what he suffered there. They taped it up Saturday, and he was able to gut through it. But here's what he had to say to the media after the game about just how it affected him, especially in that second half.
There was just a couple throws here and there where I tried to plant off that foot, and it didn't let me kind of plant like I usually do. And so a couple throws I didn't make. I told Coach I want to still throw it downfield, and so we were able to make some throws there after the first few drives, and I think he got a little confidence that I could protect myself. And so credit to our defense, man, holding us in that game, especially after the start of that second half when I wasn't able to get stuff going. So they held us in that game, made some big plays at the end, and we were able to score enough points to win.
They won the battle, but the ultimate war in the AFC, that's what we're talking about here, about how they're going to try to do that against Cincinnati, man. Yeah,
it's a war of attrition. I thought, to me, again, Mike Caldwell, a young defense coordinator, when Mahomes got hurt, to me, you go into that game and you say, I don't give a shit what happened. I'm not letting Kelsey beat me. That's going into the game. When Mahomes gets hurt, you got to say to yourself, there's no freaking way Kelsey can't get the ball now. I got to take Kelsey away. Make Smith-Schuster beat me. Make Watson beat me. Make somebody else. But I'm going to nail down. I mean, the guy's got 17 targets, 14 catches. They're running zone blitzes, and they're not covering them. When you zone dog it, right, that's great on paper, but that doesn't allow you to cover the tight end because you're treating him like a Y. You're not treating him like Travis Kelce. Like, this is what drives me crazy. Like, you're going to go play Kansas City. You got to take Kelsey out of the game. And if Chad Henne comes into the game, you got to play man-to-man. You got to force Chad Henne to make tight throws because Chad Henne will make throws against zone. Like, you got to adjust your game plan out. It's one of the reasons why Al Davis used to make every defensive coordinator that worked for him study the backup quarterback. Because if there's a sudden change, how do you change your game plan? How do you alter it? Pacheco, even though Andy didn't want to call runs, I mean, Andy called 30 runs in the game. Think about that.
That's a lot for him.
He called 30 runs for him. I mean, and you got to say, okay, this is when we're playing Mahomes, and then when Mahomes comes back in the game, you got to change your game plan because it's not the same Mahomes. I just felt like there was no adjustments on the defensive side. Then offensively, I mean, I mean, Peterson did a great job. I just didn't understand what the game plan was. They averaged more yards running than they did passing. I mean, ATN averaged 6.2 a carry. I mean, I don't know why they weren't constantly trying to run more or tie some play action. They never threw the ball down the field. They had the one throw to Kirk that he dropped, but there was a point in the game where their 24 attempts had 100 yards. Like, you're not going to beat them throwing checkdowns or throwing bubbles.
Yeah. Everything was horizontal that they were doing there. It was just all the horizontal plays, which can work at times, but it definitely didn't test this Chiefs defense there. I thought they could have used Lawrence's legs a little bit more in that offense. And Lawrence,
I kept saying it. Yeah.
In the second half, he started to just take off and run, and there was the one where he kind of ran over the defender, which I thought was just an awesome play. That's kind of a galvanizing play from a quarterback there. But they need to use. He's a good athlete. Like, use his legs, make them have to defend.
I thought so too. I thought, to me, I would have, because they're going to play a lot of cover 2 man. So, they're not accounting for them. So if they want to do that, they got to spy them. So, you can kind of run people out of it. Like when you played the Colts with Manning, you could play cover 2 because you knew he wasn't going to run. Now, you had to play it well, and he made some incredible throws. That's a whole other issue. Same thing with Brady, and they would take off occasionally. But, like, if you can't play cover 2 man against Lamar Jackson because he's going to take off, and you really can't spy him. It's hard. Mm-hmm. So you got to account for that. I thought the same thing, Femi. I thought they should have used him. They were having success running the ball against them, and they just, to me, once again, they had, that game was there for the winning. It really was. I thought that game was going to be won, and you say, well, they got lucky to cover it at the end. I think Kansas City got lucky to win the game. I really do.
Yeah,
I really do.
They were outgained, at least from a yards per play standpoint. Jacksonville had 5.8. Kansas City had 5.4. Now, you can mix that in with Mahomes being compromised, but that was the situation that ended up happening to be the case.
Look at it. They fumble in the end zone, right? They in the fourth quarter, they have a chance to win the game, and they go 8 plays. They fumble an unforced error on a fumble, right? That was an unforced error. Nothing caused that fumble but Agnew, right?
He just threw the ball up.
Then the interception, right? So they get the kicker, Bucker, makes a great tackle on the return. That's the other thing too, Femi. I want to go back to that play. We didn't mention it. When Dallas returned that kick, why didn't he take it towards the sideline? Why did he go? I think he scores on that.
He had so much room to make it a foot race. I don't know what he was doing.
That one bothered me. But anyway, the Buckers saving the tackle there. They had the ball early in the game. Remember, they had the ball early in the game. I think they went 11 plays, and I think they had to end up punting. Mm-hmm. They had a nice drive going, and they ended up having a punt from Kansas City's 39. That was the tripping game. They got 10 yards penalties, and that killed them there. That drive, that should have been 3 points. They had too many empty possessions, and a fumble, interception, and 4 punts. You're not beating Kansas City with that.
No, and it was a game that was there for the taking, given the circumstances there with Mahomes being compromised. The win, though, did put Andy Reid in some pretty high class in terms of head coaches. He's now become the 3rd head coach to win 20 playoff games. Bill Belichick, of course, the leader with 31 playoff wins. Tom Landry has 20 as well, so Reid ties Tom Landry, the late, great Tom Landry. And also for me, too, I got to give some props to Kansas City's supporting cast because, I've been vocally just skeptical of the Chiefs as a Super Bowl contender throughout the season and just the Chiefs as a whole. But I thought the supporting cast, they did what they had to do. In a situation where Mahomes couldn't be at his very best, they still won the game. I didn't think they could win a game like this with Mahomes being compromised or playing a B-plus game or something like that. And defensively, they made the plays they had to make. And also Pacheco on the ground, he was able to do some things, and guys stepped up. So I got to give the Chiefs I was wrong about Kansas City. I got to give that supporting cast a little bit of a head nod here.
If Andy gets to the Super Bowl, but if he beats Cincinnati, that'll be his greatest coaching job because he's going to have to really change. Look, he's a great coach, and he moves the ball. What he did with Henne when he gets Henne to come in there, most people would have handed the ball off in that situation, and Andy runs spacing. And Andy had probably on his play sheet, he had plays that he knew Henne could run. And Mike Caldwell didn't really understand what Henne can do and what he couldn't do. And so we're sitting here, we're talking about Henne, and and when you look at his stats, he was 5 for 7 for 23 yards. But the mythology that he played like this incredible game, like he's 5 for 7 for 23 yards. Like they ran the ball. That drive, they ran it. He threw for 23 yards and he converted a couple third downs. But that's the kind of what Andy was able to do. He made you think he was doing this, but he did that. It's really good. It's like, how does Andy get the ball to Kelsey 17 times and Dorsey can't get the ball to Diggs?
Makes you wonder, huh?
Right. Look, Kirk, if he catches that one ball, it might be a different game. I think Jacksonville, when they watch this tape, they're going to see they had so many chances in this game to win that Kansas City was really lucky to move ahead.
Yeah, I think they were definitely lucky, and that's what happens when you play a team that's inexperienced and not really used to being in this spot. I think that's like, an experienced team. I think takes advantage of what Kansas City's shortcomings were in that game, but Jacksonville just didn't have that experience. It was funny because I thought Henne, it was a very nice drive. I thought it was a hell of a drive. Like, I mean, it was a 97-yard TD drive. He obviously was not the driving force, but I would not have guessed that they would have scored a touchdown on that drive with him being backed up against his own 2-3 yard line or so. So I wanted to give him a little bit of credit there. But
he deserves it.
Yeah.
I mean, he went 12 plays. They went 83 yards. He even overcame a 15-yard penalty. He had 15 yards of penalties on the drive. He got 6 first downs on that drive, and they converted a bunch of third downs on that drive. So, I mean, look, give him all the credit, but I think it was Andy understanding who he was and who he's not, right? I mean, there's no way you could run Mahomes' offense, and it was Mike Caldwell not adjusting to what he was. Zone dogging. We're zone dogging. What are we doing?
It didn't make any sense. I mean, just double the guy and make Valdez Scantling beat you or something like that. Like,
live with him up making a play on the outside. Yeah. See if Henne could actually throw it to him accurately.
Yeah, but they're just giving him layups to Kelsey, and Kelsey, one of the best tight ends of all time, he stepped up and made big plays as well when his team needed it. Final point that I wanted to make on this game, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, because when I was listening to the broadcast, and I'm not sure if you had the volume on, if you were watching it with Millie.
I did. I have the volume on weekends because I got Millie.
Yeah. I'm sure you enjoyed yourself watching and listening to these games, but just the point that Collinsworth was making about Jacksonville and what they went through after the Urban Meyer firing, and it really stood out to me, like, just listening. Like, he was talking about how they had to heal, and Doug Peterson told them that he wasn't sure if guys were going to come back for OTAs. Like, it was that bad of an experience. I'm like it sounded like these guys had like PTSD from Urban Meyer being the head coach last season. I was like, man, right? Like, what's going on here? Like, Urban, clearly he was a disaster, but man, this might have been just the worst season in the history of the sport.
I mean, when I heard Chris say that they Kelsey's so good you could design an offense around his blocking and his I almost lost my shit. Like, okay, like, where do you come up with this stuff? Like, and then he said, they should, Kirk should throw the ball, or they should go down the middle. Like, no, like, describe what you're saying. Like, what play do you want to run? Like, I don't understand. Nobody knows coverages. Like, they should have a seminar for all these guys to understand coverages. Like, they don't know coverages. Like, you would think the networks would bring in people to teach coverages. I know they think they played so they know coverages, but they don't. It's so bad. Like, a zone dog isn't a blitz. You're playing, like, not everything's man-to-man, not everything's zone.
Yeah. It's some interesting coverage that we get from our broadcast crews, but hey, the play-by-play guys are pretty good. So
yeah,
Tarico's awesome.
He's great. But I mean, to me, I love Nance. I love listening to him. I wish Tony would stop being so nice. Like, say it. Not everybody's great. Yeah. Say it. You don't. The thing is, you don't need somebody to tell you what they're doing. Like, I don't need somebody to tell me what I'm watching on the tape. Like, I can make up my own mind. Like, if you need that, then you got to endear yourself to your sources. If you don't need that, you can say whatever you think.
Yeah, this guy is a nice guy. Let's end here with the Eagles and the Giants. I mean, this game was never close. From the first drive, it was over. Philadelphia wins 38-7.
And I was on, on WIP. I said it was going to be 31-20, and then I thought a two teaser. I thought the Giants would make it, would keep it under 14. But this, to me, was a complete understanding of how much difference there is in talent level.
Yeah.
And don't kid yourself. Don't lie to yourself now. That's A. And B, it also was, Daniel Jones is a nice player. But when he has to play fast, he's not a good player. Mm-hmm. And so when the game speeds up, he can't speed up. He doesn't have another gear to get to. And the playoffs are about another gear. And so the Eagles dominated it. They took advantage of the right tackle. Neal was a rookie. They took advantage of their lack of linebacker speed. To me, this score could have been 70. I mean, they could have done whatever they wanted. Yeah. And they just ran it. They didn't even have to throw it. It kind of was, I mean, they could have pulled Lane Johnson in the second quarter as opposed to the fourth because they didn't need him. They didn't need any of their guys that were hurt.
Yeah, they probably should have, honestly, to get him a little bit of rest there, because he's going to be in for a war this upcoming Sunday. But this was one of the few things that I got right this week from a betting standpoint. I laid the 7 at open with Philadelphia, and I just sat back Saturday night and laughed. I was like, I thought people just were outthinking the room with the Giants sentiment there with the 7.5, and we talked about this. The Giants were a bottom tier roster this season. And the Eagles, since May, we've been telling you the Eagles are the most loaded team from a personnel standpoint. And you get these two teams, Eagles coming off the bye, at home, at night, home field advantage. This was never going to be close. It was Philly from the jump.
So it's the best thing that happened to Buffalo because they got to have a dose of reality. Mm-hmm. It's the best thing for New York because they can sit there and watch the tape and say, yeah, okay, we're this far away, and if we don't improve in these areas. Now, if Daniel Jones, I know his comments after the game, well, it's a business. Daniel, look, if you want $40 million a year, God bless. I don't know who's going to give it to you because we sure as hell ain't. I mean, that's the conversation. Like, if you want $40 million a year and you want it all guaranteed and you want Kyler Murray's contract because CAA represents you, God bless you. Go get it. God bless you. We'll figure out something else. But if you take, it's like in The Sopranos when Melfi says to Tony, you don't have to eat all the macaroni. You don't have to eat it all. Like, you can leave some for somebody else. So that's the same conversation. Daniel, you can't eat all the macaroni. Like, we got to save money to help build this team because if you don't, we're not going to you can't carry us.
I think that's a good way to put it there. But the Giants do. I do think they have a good foundation.
And all you got to do is look at Dallas. You got to do is look at Dallas.
Yeah. And Jones, he's not even that good. If you paid him that kind of money, I mean, Jesus, that could really get off the rails. I do believe that with the GM, Joe Shane from Buffalo, and the head coach, Brian Daboll, I think they have a good foundation to build on this. Like, they're a well-coached team, which is something that they can hang their hat on, but they just got to get the players. And for them to get this far, kudos to that organization to do this in 1 year, but you saw the gap Saturday night.
They got to get the players, but they got to be honest. They have to be. The Giants' problems over the last 5 years is they lie to themselves. So that's how they got in this mess. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, Daboll's coaching has made those lies look better, right? So, all the shit that what's his face, Gettleman took about his drafts, obviously they're better players, but you can't lie to yourself and think they're elite. Like, you got to grade good. You can't make everybody great. Is Daniel Jones a good player? Yeah, he's a good player. Is he the 5th best player in the country? Probably not. But we can't pay him like that, So we got to be smart about this. We can't overpay for great. See, overpay for good. Mm-hmm. You can never overpay for great. You could never overpay for they couldn't overpay Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
They couldn't overpay Patrick Mahomes. But there's only about 8 or 9 players in the league that are truly great. Everybody else is good. When you overpay good, that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah, and I think you have some guys that are good that end up situationally becoming great because they're in a good situation, the circumstances.
That's right.
And that's what tricks people. And that's where you fall into the traps and paying all that money. But yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles, they advanced 38-7, big win for Philly. I know they're getting ready to hang the banner out there, Michael. I'm sure the Eagles fans are very happy.
They're greasing the poles. I mean, I think
get them greased up, man.
They're ready to go. I mean, this one won't even be close. This one, I don't even know why they're. I mean, I'll tell you what.
Niners shouldn't show up.
Henne, don't even get on the plane. Don't even get on the plane.
Well, let's talk about the game. We'll give early thoughts and a preview on the 2 conference championship games, and we'll hand out some awards on the other side. This is the GM Shuffle. All right, it's time to hand out some hardware, Michael. Who's going on the lamb this week?
Well, I mean, I think there's no doubt you got to put the Bills on the lamb, and they got to take it as a complete understanding about how they got to figure out how they close the gap. I mean, last year they're 13 seconds away from getting to the conference championship. They screwed that up. This year they're not even close. They better figure that out.
I think Dak Prescott might need to go on the lamb as well after that performance, man.
Probably too.
It's going to be a tough offseason for him. It's going to be a very tough offseason for Dak. The Fred Palermo, best game plan of the week.
You got to give it to the Bengals. I mean, they went in there. They did exactly. They're the only road team to win. They were the only dog to come through for them. And so you got to give it to them. They did a great job. They managed their offensive line. Their defense played great. And, they were in complete control of that game. There's no doubt.
If you don't know, now you know.
The Giants were a good team. The Giants were not a good team. They were a well-coached team. I think that's the difference. And you can't mistake that. I mean, it's players, coaches, and scheme. And so you got to understand, the coaching made the players better, but, man, we need a lot more talent.
We've been saying that all year, even when they were 7-2 and all that stuff, and Giants fans were getting pissed off at me. They're in my mentions saying, how are we not a good team? We're winning these games. You saw it Saturday night. There's a difference between being a well-coached team and being a good team. A good team has really good players. The Giants have a couple really good players and some guys that were put in good positions to succeed. David Ogilvy Award, the biggest frauds, Michael.
Oh, I think the Bills' defense was fraudulent. I mean, the way they played, the defensive front, all these, they've had first-round picks in there. I mean, I didn't hear Ed Oliver's name mentioned the whole goddamn day. Did you?
No, he was a ghost.
I never heard it. Yeah, the defense to me was fraudulent the whole time. I never got a sense of it. And, to go in there on the road in a hard place to play, a hostile environment, and, they didn't make themselves known, I think it's pretty clear. They never got control of that game. Never, ever got control of that game.
Yeah, you really saw the absence of Von Miller the last 6-7 weeks, I think, for that Bills defense because they got zero pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. All right, before we get out of here, let's give some early thoughts. Conference Championship Sunday, my favorite day on the sports calendar every single year, and we have two awesome games. Niners at the Eagles, Philly laying now 2.5, Cincy at Kansas City, Chiefs 1-point favorites. What are your kind of early thoughts on these two games?
Well, I think that'll flip. I think the Chief game will flip. I think Cincinnati will end up being a slight favorite before the week's out because of the Mahomes injury, not because of anything the Chiefs did. I think that's going to flip. But, right now I see some places it's -1. I've seen some -1.5s. I've seen some pick'ems. Yep. So I think that's going to fix. I think the Philly line will stay pretty consistent. It will never – if it gets to 3, you'll see too much San Francisco money.
Yeah.
2.5, I think you'll see it. I think they're probably perfectly suited to get even money on both sides. The early betting on it so far, just so you know, the early betting, everybody's hammering Philadelphia. 95% of the cash is coming in on Philly, yet the line hasn't moved, which tells you something. And then the Cincinnati game, I think, is evenly bet, yet it is moving. So I think it's pretty clear the sharps, the people that do this for a living, are taking Cincy. And I think people that casually bet are taking Philadelphia because they think Philly's going to win.
Yeah, I think the Bengals closed as the favorite in this game, which sounds crazy to see that Patrick Mahomes is going to be an underdog in an AFC Championship game at home. But just with his status.
Patrick Mahomes. It's Patrick Mahomes injured. It's not Patrick Mahomes. And, and you're going to have to take some – look, we really never – we did the show Saturday morning, and we had a guy on from Buffalo, and he talked about the weather not being a problem. When I turned the TV on at 4:30, I was like, holy hell. Nobody told me it was going to snow like this. Every time I handicap it, I got to do a better job on weather handicapping. I've had 3 bad losses on my handicapping based on weather. I thought the weather against Miami was going to be a disaster. When Tua went up there, it wasn't. I didn't think the weather was going to be a factor. Everybody's talking about the weather being bad in Kansas City. Kansas City's weather was fine.
Yeah, the snow was coming down in Western New York there. I almost think that this Cincy line, I might be crazy, but I could see it closing Bengals 2-point favorites, maybe even 2.5-point favorites if we don't see Mahomes practice at all this week. Do you think he practices this week?
I think they're going to pretend he does.
Yeah.
I don't see how he does. He's got a high ankle sprain. I know his play is not human, but his body is human. He's not an alien. And so he's got a high ankle. He couldn't plan on it. He was hopping around. And you say, well, he finished the game. I think he got injected, which I think is a player's right to do. But that injection allowed him to play, not because I asked a team doctor on Saturday, and I went through these whole scenarios with him. And he said, yeah, I think you're right about everything you're saying. And I think, what do you think about next week? He said, well, he can get out there, but I don't know how effective he's going to be.
Yeah, I think once we get more money into the market, I think that's going to be Cincinnati. You're going to be able to get the Chiefs as an underdog, but I don't know if you want them as an underdog if Mahomes is 55% out there on the field. But it's going to be a tough situation for Kansas City as they try to get back to the Super Bowl, or maybe we see the Bengals go ahead and go back as the 2-time AFC defending champions. All right, that does it for this week on the podcast. Thank you to DraftKings and VSiN, as always. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, on the 1s and 2s. Thank you to you, Michael, for wearing black alongside with me for our YouTube audience as we mourn the loss.
We're going to list them. I'm going to get all those Playmates of the Year from 70 to 80 or to 80 to 90. I don't know. What year were you born?
90.
All right, we're going to go from 95 to 05. And then we'll go from 2000 to 210. That's about the time we're looking at. All right, I'll handle that.
Make sure you get those for me. We got to see the sample size first.
Yep.
All right, I'll talk to you Thursday.
You're going to keep reading that book. We'll talk later.
Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.